This story contains themes of psychological distress, memory manipulation, and existential dread, which some listeners may find unsettling. I woke up. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting stripes across my duvet. For a split second, everything was normal. Then the silence hit me. Not just quiet, but an echoing hollow silence where a lifetime of familiar sounds should have been. The gentle rustle of the sheets on the bed next to mine. The soft, rhythmic breathing of another person. The low hum of Emily's phone vibrating on her nightstand, signaling an early text from her boyfriend. None of it. Just me. Alone. My eyes snapped open, scanning the room. My room. Our room. Except it wasn't. The twin bed that had always been pushed against the opposite wall, perfectly mirroring mine, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, modern writing desk, adorned with a single untouched laptop and a stack of books I didn't recognize. The posters on the wall, the ones Emily had insisted on, the band posters and the abstract art prints, had vanished, replaced by a framed photograph of a serene landscape I'd never seen before. It was like I'd woken up in a meticulously staged display room, a stranger's space. But the window was mine. The old wooden dresser in the corner with its chipped paint was mine. The clothes piled on the chair were mine. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through the lingering fog of sleep. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a dream. My mind, usually a chaotic archive of memories, felt strangely clear, yet utterly disoriented. Emily. I whispered, the name feeling foreign, a fragile sound swallowed by the unfamiliar quiet. No answer. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the familiar carpet cool beneath my bare feet. My feet, which had always known the path around Emily's discarded clothes, her shoes, her half-packed gym bag. Now the path was clear. Unobstructed. Too clear. I walked to where her bed should have been, reaching out a hand, half expecting to feel the rumpled duvet, the cool cotton sheets. My fingers met empty air. Then the smooth, cool surface of the writing desk. A shiver traced its way down my spine. This was wrong. All wrong. Panic, cold and relentless, began to set in. I stumbled out of the room, my breath catching in my throat. The hallway was the same, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood. But even here something felt off. The hooks by the front door, where Emily always hung her bright yellow rain jacket, were empty. The shoe rack, usually overflowing with her sneakers and boots, held only my own few pairs. Mom? Dad? Emily? I called out, my voice cracking. Silence. The house was utterly silent. Too silent for a Saturday morning. Usually, Emily would be blasting her pop music, Mom would be clanking pots in the kitchen, Dad humming along to the news in the living room. I rushed to the kitchen. Empty. The breakfast nook, where we'd eaten countless meals, argued over cereal, shared secrets, was spotless. No half-finished coffee mugs, no crumbs on the counter. It looked like no one had been there. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a prank. This was too elaborate, too unsettling. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she'd gone out early, but she never went anywhere without telling me. We were inseparable, identical twins. Joined at the hip, everyone called us. Our lives were intertwined, a double helix of shared experiences and inside jokes. I raced up the stairs again, my mind frantically scrambling for an explanation. Maybe she was in the bathroom? No. Maybe she'd moved out and I'd forgotten? No, that was insane. We were 22. We lived at home while saving for our own place. Together. That's when I heard it. The gentle murmur of voices from downstairs. Relief so potent it almost buckled my knees washed over me. They were here. My parents. They would explain everything. This was just a bizarre nightmare. I flew down the stairs, bursting into the living room. My parents, David and Susan Miller, sat on the sofa, sipping coffee, watching the morning news. Their faces were calm, ordinary. Too ordinary. Mom! Dad! I practically shouted, my voice trembling. Where is she? Where's Emily? My mother, Susan, slowly turned her head, her brow furrowing slightly. Sarah? What are you talking about, honey? You just woke up. Her voice was soft, confused. Emily. My sister. Our sister. Where is she? Her bed is gone, her things are gone, the whole house is... It's wrong. I gestured wildly around the room, feeling tears welling in my eyes. My father, David, lowered his newspaper, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to concern. Sarah, sweetie, are you feeling okay? You sound distressed. Distressed? Dad, Emily is missing. Our own daughter. How can you be so calm? I stammered, my voice rising. My mother stood up, walking towards me, her hand reaching out to touch my forehead. Missing? Sarah, honey, there's no Emily. You're our only child. The words hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mom, stop. This isn't funny. You know Emily. She's my twin. My identical twin. We were born 5 minutes apart. You named us Sarah and Emily Miller. Remember? My mother's face was etched with genuine confusion, tinged with worry. Sarah, you're scaring me. We only have one daughter. You've always been our only child. My father nodded, his eyes filled with a deep, unsettling pity. She's right, sweetheart. You're our miracle. Our one and only. No, this couldn't be happening. My parents, my rock, my foundation were looking at me as if I had lost my mind. Their eyes held no hint of recognition for the person I was desperately trying to make them see. No shared memories, no knowing glances. Just blank, concerned stares. A cold, suffocating terror enveloped me. I backed away, shaking my head. No. You're wrong. You have to be wrong. The photos. Our photos. The photo albums. We have hundreds of them. I sprinted to the living room bookshelf, tearing through the neatly arranged albums. Page after page. My baby pictures. My toddler pictures. My school pictures. My birthday parties. Always just me. Sarah Miller. Alone. Every picture where Emily should have been, she was gone. A solo shot of me on my first day of kindergarten, instead of us holding hands, identical backpacks on our backs. A single figure blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Not 2 grinning faces. Family vacations, school plays, graduations, always just me. My parents smiling proudly at their only daughter. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold the albums. I dropped one, and the photographs scattered across the polished hardwood floor. I frantically picked them up, desperate for a single piece of proof. A twin. A sister. A best friend who shared my face, my DNA, my entire life. But there was nothing. Not a single trace. It was as if she had been meticulously erased, not just from the photographs, but from the very fabric of existence. This is impossible, I mumbled, tears streaming down my face. She was here. I remember her. I remember everything. Her laugh, her favorite blue sweater. The way she always stole my fries, her terrible singing in the shower. My mother knelt beside me, her voice soft, laced with a heartbreaking concern. Sarah, honey, you're exhausted. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you just had a very vivid dream. A dream? This wasn't a dream. This was my life. Or what had been my life. I looked at my parents, their faces kind, worried, utterly oblivious. They weren't lying. They truly believed I was their only child. The world hadn't just forgotten Emily, it had never known her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just my parents or my house. It was everything. My phone. I snatched it from my pocket, scrolling through my contacts, my photos. No Emily. No shared selfies, no texts, no calls. My entire digital footprint, an undeniable record of my life, had been rewritten. My best friend, Jessica Chen. I frantically dialed her number. Her voice, bright and cheerful, answered. Hey Sarah. What's up? Jess. It's Emily. Have you seen her? Do you know where she is? I blurted out, my voice desperate. A beat of confused silence. Emily? Who's Emily, Sarah? Are you okay? You sound really upset. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Jessica, my best friend since kindergarten. Someone who knew every secret, every joy, every sorrow of my life, didn't know Emily. It was then, staring at my parents' bewildered faces, the silent, empty house, the photographs that lied, that the true horror clawed its way into my soul. I wasn't just missing my twin. My twin had been surgically removed from reality itself, and I was the only one who remembered, the only one who knew she had ever existed. Was I losing my mind? Was this some elaborate, cruel prank? Or had something far more terrifying, something beyond comprehension, ripped my sister from the world, leaving me utterly alone, adrift in a reality that refused to acknowledge her? The world was telling me I was crazy, but my memories were screaming the truth, and I had no idea which one to believe. The world was telling me I was crazy, but my memories were screaming the truth, and I had no idea which one to believe. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through the initial shock, twisting my stomach into knots. I stumbled away from my parents, their faces a blur of pity and concern that only amplified the terror. My mind, a whirlwind of fragmented images and desperate questions, latched onto one frantic thought: proof. There had to be proof. I raced back to my bedroom, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, tearing through drawers, pulling books from shelves appending my closet. Every item I touched, every familiar scent, felt like a betrayal. Where were the shared secrets, the hidden notes, the silly mementos only twins would understand? My hands, trembling uncontrollably, found nothing but my own solitary life. Then a new wave of icy dread washed over me. Emily's room. It was right across the hall. I gripped the doorknob, my breath catching in my throat, praying, bargaining with the silent universe for it to be there, just as it always was. But when the door swung open, the sight that greeted me was a fresh stab to my already fractured reality. It wasn't Emily's room. Not a trace of her vibrant personality, her messy art projects, her overflowing bookshelf. It was a sterile, impersonal guest room, meticulously tidy, smelling faintly of lavender air freshener. A pristine duvet covered a single bed. A generic landscape painting hung on the wall where Emily's band posters used to be. The small, ornate jewelry box she'd cherished, a gift from our grandmother, was gone. Her worn-out ballet slippers, tucked under her bed for years, vanished. Even the faint scratch on the wooden floor where her heavy desk chair always sat was smoothed away, leaving no mark. It was as if this room had always been this way, an empty vessel waiting for a visitor, never a home for my twin sister. A choke sob escaped me. My legs gave out, and I crumpled to the floor in the doorway, staring into the void where Emily should have been. The silence of the house pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just a memory lapse, a misunderstanding. This was an erasure, a systematic dismantling of a life. Who could do this? How? And why was I the only one who remembered? I spent the rest of the day in a desperate, feverish search. I pulled out old photo albums from the dusty box in the attic, flipping through brittle pages, my fingers tracing the smiling faces of our family. My parents younger, happier. Me a gap-toothed child. But every picture that should have featured Emily, every birthday party, every summer vacation, every Christmas morning, was either missing her entirely or, far more unsettling, I was there twice. A chillingly seamless clone of myself, standing in Emily's place, wearing her clothes, mimicking her pose. In one photo, a picture of us at the beach, me in a bright pink swimsuit and Emily in a neon green one. Emily was gone. Instead, there I was, in the exact same pink swimsuit, my arm awkwardly around my own shoulder, the background subtly shifted to hide the impossible overlap. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't just erasing her. It was twisting reality, forging a new past where I had always been an only child. The meticulousness of it, the sheer audacity, sent shivers down my spine. I tried the yearbooks from middle school and high school. Every page, every group photo, every candid shot told the same horrifying lie. Sarah Miller, class of 2023. No Emily. Her name wasn't in the index, her face wasn't in any of the pictures. The school's online portal yielded similar results. My transcripts, my attendance records, my achievements, all there. But no mention of a twin sister, no Emily Miller sharing my birth date, my classes, my life. I went back downstairs, my voice hoarse, my eyes burning. My parents, David and Jessica, were in the living room watching television, their faces etched with concern as I approached. "Mom, Dad," I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper. "Please just look. Look at these photos. Look at the yearbooks. This isn't right." She was here. Emily was here. I thrust the album at them, pointing to a picture of me, alone, at what should have been our 10th birthday party. My mother, Jessica, took the album gently, her eyes scanning the page. A sad smile touched her lips. "Sweetheart, you're the only one in that picture. You always have been. It was a lovely party, remember? You loved your unicorn cake." My father, David, placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch heavy with a sympathy that felt like a judgment. "Sarah, we're really worried about you. This isn't healthy. Maybe it's time we talk to Dr. Evans again." Dr. Evans was a therapist I'd seen briefly a few years ago for stress during college applications. The suggestion, though meant kindly, felt like a punch to the gut. They weren't just denying Emily, they were suggesting I was the problem. The world wasn't wrong, I was. Desperate, I retreated to the only place I felt I had left. My phone. Social media. That digital echo chamber of our lives. Surely there would be something there. Old posts, tagged photos, comments from friends. I scrolled through my Instagram, my Facebook, my Snapchat memories. Years of digital history, meticulously curated. Every picture of me as a child, every birthday post, every vacation photo, every selfie. Emily was absent. The posts that should have been happy birthday to my amazing twin sister were now simply happy birthday to me, or celebrating another year. Group photos with friends where Emily and I would invariably be side by side now showed me standing alone, or with another friend awkwardly filling the space where she should have been. Our joint Instagram account, Miller Twins Adventures, was gone, completely erased from existence. My friends' profiles, Chloe Peterson, Michael Chun, even distant cousins. I scoured their old posts looking for any trace, any tag, any comment referring to Emily. Nothing. It was a black hole, a digital void where a vibrant, loving sister once existed. I started texting and calling mutual friends, my voice trembling with a carefully controlled urgency. Hey Chloe, do you remember Emily? My twin sister. A pause, a hesitant. Who? Sarah, are you okay? You've always been an only child. Michael Chun, who we'd known since kindergarten, was equally confused. Emily? You mean your cousin Emily? But she lives in California. You haven't seen her in years. Their genuine confusion, their gentle attempts to steer me back to what they perceived as reality, were more terrifying than outright denial. It meant they truly didn't remember. They weren't lying. The world was not just denying Emily. It was actively gaslighting me, making me question my own sanity. My memories, once vivid and concrete, began to feel like phantom limbs, aching with a presence that no one else could perceive. Was I truly losing my mind? Was this some elaborate hallucination, a breakdown triggered by stress, or something far more sinister? The thought was a cold, venomous whisper in my ear. I locked myself in my room, the curtains drawn, the silence deafening. Hours bled into each other, marked only by the growing ache in my head and the gnawing emptiness in my chest. My parents knocked periodically, their voices muffled and concerned, offering food, suggesting I rest. Rest from what? From the terrifying realization that my entire life had been rewritten, and I was the sole witness? As darkness fell, casting long, accusing shadows across my room, a sliver of desperation turned into a tiny, defiant spark. There had to be something. One thing. One untouched thread in this meticulously rewoven tapestry of reality. I wasn't just going to give up, not when every cell in my body screamed that Emily was real. I remembered an old external hard drive, tucked away in the back of my desk drawer, filled with ancient photos and documents from before I ever used cloud storage. It was a relic, a bulky, dusty rectangle I hadn't touched in years. Maybe, just maybe, it had escaped the purge. With trembling hands, I plugged it into my laptop, the small indicator light glowing a hopeful blue in the oppressive darkness. My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through folders labeled old photos, school projects, miscellaneous files. Most of them were corrupted, unreadable, or mirrored the altered reality of my current life. But then, deep within a subfolder I rarely opened, named simply backup_2017, I found it. A single oddly labeled file. img_6745_duplicate JPG. My heart leaped. It was an unusual file name, almost an anomaly. I clicked on it, my breath held tight in my throat, praying it wasn't just another image of me alone. The photo loaded slowly, agonizingly, pixel by pixel, and then there she was. Emily, standing right beside me, both of us beaming, wearing matching striped sweaters, holding up a horribly lopsided birthday cake. The backdrop was our old kitchen, unmistakable. It was a photo from our 12th birthday, a day I remembered with absolute clarity, but the terrifying detail was this. In my current photo album, the exact same picture existed, but Emily was gone. I was there, holding half the cake, a ghostly, empty space beside me, the cake itself subtly resized to appear whole. This duplicate, this img_6745_duplicate at JPG, was untouched. Undeniable. A raw, unfiltered glimpse into the truth. My twin sister, vibrant and alive, staring back at me from the past. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was not crazy. Something horrifying had happened, and this photo, this single fragile piece of evidence, was my only hope. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that I was not crazy. Something horrifying had happened, and this photo, this single fragile piece of evidence, was my only hope. My fingers trembled, tracing the outline of my sister's face, a face I had never truly known, yet felt an unbearable ache for. The image was faded, creased, but undeniably real. Two identical girls, bathed in the soft, slightly sepia glow of an old photograph. Emily. Her name echoed in the silent chambers of my mind, a name conjured from a half-forgotten dream, now given form and substance. My twin. My sister. She was real. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over me. Profound relief that I wasn't losing my mind, but an even more profound terror at what this photo implied. If Emily existed and no one remembered her, what kind of monstrous force could erase a person from existence? From the memories of their own family? I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. My parents had to see it. They had to remember. Clutching the photo, I stumbled out of my room, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the house. I found them in the living room, absorbed in a documentary, their faces illuminated by the flickering blue light of the television. They looked so normal, so serene, so utterly oblivious. The sight filled me with a fresh surge of dread. Mom! Dad! My voice was a desperate gasp, raw and unsteady. They both startled, turning to me with expressions of mild annoyance, quickly replaced by concern as they saw my frantic state. Sarah, what is it? Are you all right? My mother, Jessica, asked, her brow furrowing. My father, Michael, muted the TV, his gaze sharp and questioning. I thrust the photo forward, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. Look! Just look at this! They exchanged a quick, confused glance before my father took the picture. As his eyes fell upon the image, I watched his face intently, searching for any flicker of recognition, any hint of memory, any crack in their carefully constructed reality. His eyes widened ever so slightly for a fraction of a second. A tremor, almost imperceptible, ran through him. Then, just as quickly, his expression smoothed over, becoming unreadable. My mother leaned closer, peering at the photo over his shoulder. What is this, honey? She asked, her voice calm, perhaps a little too calm. An old picture of you? No, I cried, my voice rising in desperation. It's not just me. Look closely. There are two of us. That's Emily, my twin sister. My father let out a soft, dismissive chuckle, handing the photo back to me. Sarah, love, that's definitely you. You had that little floral dress you adored, remember? And your hair was always a bit wild back then. But there are two of us. I insisted, pointing a trembling finger at the second child. Look at her face. It's not me. It's Emily. My mother came over, placing a gentle hand on my arm. Her touch, usually comforting, now felt like a cage. Darling, I think you're letting your imagination run away with you. It's an old, faded photo. The angle, the light. It can make things look different. Perhaps a reflection, or a trick of the light. She tried to take the photo from me, her fingers brushing against mine. I recoiled, clutching it tighter. No, it's not a trick. This is real. She was real. Emily was real, and you both just forgot her. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. My parents, my anchors, my safe harbor, were now part of the terrifying conspiracy. My father stood up, his posture stiffening. Sarah, this is getting out of hand. We understand you've been under a lot of stress lately, but you need to stop with these fantasies. You are our only child. You have always been our only child. His voice was firm, unwavering, but there was an underlying tension, a subtle edge of warning that sent a shiver down my spine. Fantasies. I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You think I want to believe this? You think I want to think my own parents would forget one of their children? That they would lie to me? We are not lying, Sarah, my mother said, her voice now edged with a weary patience that felt more condescending than comforting. We are trying to help you. Perhaps you need to talk to Dr. Evans again. This obsession with a non-existent twin. The mention of Dr. Evans, my therapist, was a gut punch. They were trying to pathologize me, to dismiss my desperate plea as a symptom of mental instability. They were gaslighting me, expertly and mercilessly. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the faces of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They looked at me with what they clearly believed was concern, but I saw only a wall impenetrable and cold. I realized with a sickening lurch that confronting them was useless. They were either too deeply entrenched in the lie, or too afraid to remember the truth. "You're wrong," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're both wrong, and I'm going to prove it." I turned and fled back to my room, locking the door behind me. My sanctuary now felt like a prison. I carefully tucked the photo under my mattress, a tiny, fragile secret in a world determined to erase it. My mind raced. If my parents were compromised, who else could I turn to? Who else might have known Emily? Grandparents. My grandmother, Helen. She was a bit eccentric, a collector of memories, a keeper of family history. She spent hours poring over old photo albums and telling stories of generations past. If anyone would remember, it would be Grandma Helen. The next morning, I made an excuse about needing a break from studying and drove to Grandma Helen's house. Her small, cozy home always smelled of lavender and old books, a comforting scent that usually brought me peace. Today, it felt like a labyrinth of forgotten secrets. Grandma Helen greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "Sarah, darling, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. I just brewed some fresh chamomile tea." We sat in her sun-drenched living room, sipping tea, surrounded by antique furniture and framed photographs. I tried to steer the conversation gently, asking about my parents' childhoods, about the family history. Grandma Helen recounted tales of her own parents, of my father as a mischievous boy, of my mother, Jessica, as a quiet, studious girl. But there was no mention of a second child. "No, Emily." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Grandma," I began, my voice a little shaky, "when Mom and Dad were first married and they had me, was there anyone else? Any other babies?" Grandma Helen tilted her head, a thoughtful frown creasing her brow. "Well, no, dear. You were their first and only. A beautiful surprise you were. Your mother had a difficult pregnancy with you. Bless her heart. She always said she couldn't imagine going through that again." She smiled, a fond, distant look in her eyes. My heart sank. Even Grandma Helen. But something in her expression, a fleeting hesitation, a subtle shift in her gaze, told me there might be more to it. Or perhaps I was just desperately searching for hope. "You have so many wonderful old photos, Grandma," I said, trying a different approach. "Could we look through some of your albums? I love seeing pictures of Mom and Dad when they were young." "Of course, darling," she chirped, her eyes lighting up. "I just organized the ones from your father's side of the family. They're all in the attic in that old cedar chest. I'll get them." "Oh no, Grandma, you stay right here," I insisted, getting up. "I can get them. You just relax." She nodded, settling back into her armchair. "Such a good girl. Just be careful up there, it's a bit dusty." The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten memories. Dust motes danced in the lone beam of sunlight cutting through a grimy window. Old trunks, forgotten furniture draped in white sheets, and stacks of yellowed boxes filled the space. I found the cedar chest, just as Grandma Helen described, and began sifting through the albums. Page after page I saw my parents, my grandparents, various aunts, uncles, and cousins, and me. Pictures of me as a baby, a toddler, a child. Always alone. No Emily. Despair began to creep in, a cold, heavy blanket threatening to smother my last vestiges of hope. But I wasn't ready to give up. I started opening other boxes, rummaging through forgotten trinkets and dusty heirlooms. Most contained old clothes, letters, or mundane household items. Then, tucked away in a small, unmarked wooden box behind a stack of old magazines, I found it. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, and surprisingly heavy. I lifted the lid, my breath catching in my throat. Inside, nestled amongst layers of tissue paper, were items that felt both profoundly familiar and utterly foreign. First, a tiny hand-knitted baby blanket. It was a soft, pale lavender, a color I vaguely remembered from a dream, a whisper of warmth and comfort. Below it, a tarnished silver locket. It was smooth, cool against my fingers. I managed to pry it open. On one side, a faded, almost indistinguishable image of two swaddled infants. On the other, two delicate initials were engraved, SM and M. Sarah Miller and Emily Miller. My hands began to shake violently. And then underneath the locket, the undeniable proof. A yellowed hospital wristband. Faded but still legible. Miller Sarah, and right below it, impossibly, Miller Emily. Both with the same birth date. My birth date. My twin. My sister. Emily was real. This wasn't a dream, a faded photo, or a trick of the light. This was concrete, undeniable evidence. My mind reeled. Why would this be hidden here, in my grandmother's attic? Why would she deny Emily's existence, yet keep these deeply personal mementos? I stumbled down the attic stairs, the wooden box clutched to my chest, the wristband and locket in my trembling hand. Grandma Helen looked up as I entered the living room, her gentle smile faltering as she saw my pale face and the objects I held. "Sarah, dear, what have you found?" she asked, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. I held out the wristband, my finger pointing to the two names. "Grandma, who is Emily?" Her eyes, usually so bright, went wide with a terror I had never seen before. The color drained from her face, leaving it ashen and drawn. Her hands flew to her mouth, trembling. Where did you get those?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "From the wooden box in the attic," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. "Grandma, tell me, please, who is Emily?" She started to shake, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that racked her entire body. Her gaze darted around the room, as if searching for an escape or an unseen watcher. No, it's not possible," they said. "They said it was for the best. For everyone." "Who said, Grandma?" I pressed, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and burgeoning hope. "Who told you what was for the best?" Her eyes, filled with a profound, decades-old terror, finally met mine. "The man," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, her gaze fixed on something far beyond me, lost in a horrifying memory. "He came," he said, "a clean slate. For your protection." The man. A clean slate. For my protection. The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't just my parents' denial. This was something far bigger, far more sinister. Someone had orchestrated Emily's disappearance. Someone powerful enough to erase a child from existence, and to instill such deep-seated fear in an entire family. Grandma Helen wasn't just forgetting. She was terrified. I looked at the wristband, then at my grandmother, who now sat hunched in her chair, weeping silently. The lavender blanket, the locket, the hospital band. They were no longer just proof of Emily's existence. They were fragments of a terrifying puzzle, hinting at a conspiracy that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. My twin wasn't just forgotten. She was taken. And my own family, whether willingly or under duress, was complicit. I clutched the evidence, my mind racing, the world tilting on its axis once more. The faded paper crumpled slightly in my trembling hand. A birth certificate. Not just my birth certificate, but theirs. Sarah Miller. And right beneath it, clear as day, a name that had been meticulously erased from my world. Emily Miller. Same date of birth. Same parents. My parents. The hospital crest, a faded blue bird, was still visible in the top corner. St. Jude's Medical Center. My childhood hospital, the place of my earliest vague memories of shots and checkups, now felt like a sinister landmark. Next to the certificate was a small, slightly bent, tarnished silver locket. It was cold against my palm. Engraved on one side in delicate swirling script were the initials S+E. On the other, a date almost illegible but undeniably my birthday. Inside, when I managed to pry it open with a trembling thumb, were two miniature blurry photos. Two infants swaddled tightly, their tiny faces pressed together. One looked like the baby me I'd seen in old photo albums. The other, an identical, ghostly reflection. And then the final undeniable piece of the puzzle. A baby's hospital ID bracelet. Yellowed with age, stretched and brittle, but the name was still perfectly clear. Emily Miller. My breath hitched. The air in the attic, already thick with dust and forgotten memories, suddenly felt suffocating. My twin wasn't just a figment of a dream, a fleeting childhood fantasy. She was real. She had existed, and she had been erased. My family, the people who had raised me, loved me, tucked me in at night, were not just complicit in this monstrous secret. They were the architects of my solitary existence. The silence of the house pressed in on me, no longer comforting but menacing. Every creak of the old floorboards, every distant hum of the refrigerator felt like a watchful eye, a whispered accusation. I carefully placed the evidence back into the hidden compartment, my fingers tracing the outline of the false bottom. It was too dangerous to keep it on me, too dangerous to leave it out. My mind, usually a chaotic storm, was now a terrifyingly clear, cold landscape of logic and fear. I had to get out. I needed air. I needed to think without the walls of my childhood home closing in on me. Slipping downstairs, I mumbled something about needing to clear my head to my mother, who was engrossed in a gardening magazine. She barely looked up, offering a vague, "Don't be out too late, sweetie." The normalcy of her tone, the casualness of her dismissal, sent a shiver down my spine. How could she be so calm, so utterly unburdened, knowing what she knew, what she had done? I drove aimlessly at first, the familiar streets of our quiet town blurring past, unrecognizable through the fog of my terror. The quaint houses, the laughing children playing in their yards, the elderly couple walking their dog. It all felt like a carefully constructed facade, a stage set for a play I was only just realizing I was a reluctant player in. My own life, my own identity felt like a lie. I pulled into the parking lot of a deserted park overlooking the small lake, the one where my father used to take me fishing when I was a kid. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows across the water, mirroring the twisted reality inside my head. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screen. Who could I call? Who could I trust? My best friend Jessica would think I was having a breakdown. My boyfriend David would try to rationalize it, tell me it was a dream, a misunderstanding. No, this was too deep, too dark for casual confidence. This was a secret that had been buried alive for decades. My parents. My mind kept returning to them. How could they? What kind of parents could erase one of their children, and then raise the other in a world built on that erasure? Was it for money? Protection? A dark, unthinkable reason? The questions swirled, each more horrifying than the last. I had to be careful. If they were capable of this, what else were they capable of? Confrontation was not an option, not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the why and the how. My gaze drifted to the hospital crest on the birth certificate, seared into my memory. St. Jude's Medical Center. It was still operating, a large modern facility on the outskirts of town. My first instinct was to go there, demand answers. But what would I say? "Hello. I think you helped my parents disappear my twin sister 30 years ago?" I would be laughed out of the building, or worse, they'd call my parents, and then what? My discovery would be exposed, and I'd be left with nothing but their denial. I decided on a different approach. Subtlety. Observation. I would watch them, listen to them, look for cracks in their perfect facade, and I would start digging quietly, carefully from the outside in. Returning home, I tried to act normal, a task that felt like performing a complex, dangerous tightrope walk without a net. My parents were watching a rerun of an old sitcom, their laughter echoing eerily in the living room. I joined them on the couch, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Mom," I started, trying to keep my voice light, casual. "Do you remember that old photo album? The big red one with the velvet cover? I was looking for it earlier, couldn't find it." My mother paused, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Oh, that one? I think I packed it away. It was getting so brittle. Probably in one of the boxes in the attic, near your old school projects." My stomach clenched. That was exactly where I had found the evidence. Was she testing me? Or was she genuinely unaware? My father, sensing the slight tension, chimed in. "Why do you need it, sweetie?" "Nostalgia. Something like that," I managed, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about old times. Childhood memories." Their eyes met for a fleeting second, a silent communication passing between them that I couldn't decipher. It was too quick, too subtle. But I felt it. A flicker of something. Concern? Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. The next few days were a blur of forced smiles, strained conversations, and intense, covert observation. Every word they spoke, every gesture they made, was scrutinized by my newfound paranoia. My mother seemed more withdrawn, often lost in thought, her movements slower, more deliberate. My father, usually jovial and boisterous, was quieter, his eyes often darting to me when he thought I wasn't looking. The air in the house was thick with unspoken truths. I spent my evenings in my room, researching St. Jude's Medical Center online. Old newspaper archives, staff directories, anything I could find from 30 years ago. It was a daunting task, like searching for a needle in a haystack, especially with limited information. I found lists of doctors, nurses, administrative staff from that era, but no immediate breakthroughs. One afternoon, while my parents were out running errands, I decided to revisit the attic. My previous discovery had been almost accidental, driven by an old memory. This time I was methodical. I went through every box, every trunk, every forgotten corner. My heart hammered with a desperate hope, a terrifying dread. I found nothing else related to Emily. No other photos, no clothes, no toys. It was as if that small box had been the only physical manifestation of her existence, deliberately preserved or perhaps simply forgotten in the scramble to erase her. Frustration mounted. I was hitting a wall. The attic, once a treasure trove of secrets, now felt empty, picked clean. I was about to give up, my shoulders slumping in defeat, when my eyes caught on something tucked away behind a stack of old board games. It was a small, unassuming wooden box, not much bigger than a shoebox, painted a faded blue. It looked like something a child might keep trinkets in. I vaguely remembered seeing it in my mother's craft room years ago, but it had vanished. I pulled it out, dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight filtering through the attic window. It was surprisingly heavy. I opened it expecting old buttons or yarn, but instead I found a collection of old and used cell phones. Not smartphones, but ancient flip phones, brick phones, relics from a bygone era of mobile technology. My mother was notoriously bad with technology, always upgrading and then just keeping the old ones just in case. I picked one up, a small silver flip phone. It felt strangely cold in my hand. Out of curiosity, I pressed the power button. To my surprise, the screen flickered to life. The battery was almost dead, but enough juice remained to illuminate the small, pixelated display. It showed a time, a date, and a list of recent calls. My blood ran cold as I scrolled down. The last outgoing call was just 2 weeks ago. And the number? It wasn't anyone I recognized. It wasn't my father's or my grandmother's or any of our family friends. It was a local number, but completely unfamiliar. I scrolled back further, noting a pattern. The same unfamiliar number, called sporadically over the past few months. And then a different number called even more frequently, almost daily a few years back. It was always a local number, never saved with a name. This wasn't just old evidence. This was active. This was current. Someone was still in contact. Someone was still managing this secret or perhaps being managed by it. The phone wasn't just a relic. It was a lifeline, a clandestine communication device hidden in plain sight. My mother, with her aversion to technology, would never use a phone like this for everyday calls. This was for something else entirely. I quickly memorized the most recent number, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a forgotten twin anymore. This was about an ongoing live secret. A secret that my parents were actively maintaining. The world tilted on its axis once more. But this time it wasn't just about the past. It was about the terrifying unknown present and a future that felt increasingly perilous. I clutched the phone, the cold metal a stark contrast to the burning suspicion in my gut. My next step was clear. I had to find out who was on the other end of that line. My thumb hovered over the call button, my heart hammering against my ribs. Logic screamed at me to be cautious, to think, to strategize. But a primal urgency, a desperate need for answers drowned out everything else. I had to know. I pressed the call button. The phone rang once, then twice, each pulse of sound echoing the frantic beat in my chest. On the third ring, a click and then a voicemail. My breath hitched. It wasn't a generic automated message. It was a human voice, but distorted, as if filtered through static in a cheap voice modulator. "You shouldn't have remembered," it rasped, the words laced with a chilling, almost mechanical hiss. Then, just as quickly, the voice cut out, replaced by a low, persistent hum, like the distant thrum of an old motor, or perhaps, the subtle vibration of an empty room. The call disconnected. My hand trembled, the phone almost slipping from my grasp. "You shouldn't have remembered." The words clawed at my mind, cold and sharp. Remembered what? Emily? The life we shared? And who was this person? The voice offered no clues, no gender, no discernible accent. Only that terrifying, synthesized whisper. I called back immediately. Voicemail again. I listened, my ear pressed against the speaker, desperate to catch any nuance I might have missed. The same distorted voice, the same 3 words, followed by that unsettling hum. I dialed again and again, probably 10 times, each attempt yielding the same chilling result. It was a loop, a pre-recorded message designed to send a very specific, very unsettling message. The hum, though, it was persistent. It felt familiar somehow, but I couldn't place it. It wasn't a natural sound. It was mechanical, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, but not a heartbeat. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. This wasn't some random wrong number. This was targeted. Someone knew. Someone knew I was remembering. Someone knew I was looking for Emily, and they wanted me to stop. I paced my small living room, the phone a dead weight in my hand. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every creak of the old house amplified. The hum from the voicemail, even when I wasn't playing it, seemed to resonate in the quiet. I felt watched. The feeling was insidious, creeping up my spine, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. My parents were clearly compromised, either blinded by some collective delusion or actively participating in this grotesque charade. I needed someone outside, someone who knew the real me, the me who had a twin sister. My thoughts immediately went to Jessica. Jessica Miller, my best friend since kindergarten. We drifted a little since college, but she was the kind of friend who, no matter how much time passed, you could pick up right where you left off. She was pragmatic, intelligent, and fiercely loyal. More importantly, she lived 2 states away now, far from the suffocating influence of my parents and this twisted reality. I scrolled through my contacts, my finger hovering over her name. What would I say? Hey Jess? Remember my twin sister, Emily? Well, apparently she never existed. And now I'm getting creepy calls from a voice that tells me I shouldn't have remembered her. It sounded insane, even to me. But the alternative was facing this alone, succumbing to the creeping doubt that maybe I was the one losing my mind. No, I knew what I saw, what I felt, what I remembered. Emily was real. Taking a deep breath, I pressed call. It rang, a normal, reassuring sound after the distorted terror of the previous call. Jessica answered on the 3rd ring, her voice bright and familiar. Hey, Sarah. Wow, long time no talk. Everything okay? Her cheerful tone was a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. Hey Jess. Yeah, no, not really. Can you talk? Do you have a few minutes? Her voice softened with immediate concern. Of course. What's up? You sound shaken. Shaken is an understatement, I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. Jess, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to believe me. This is going to sound absolutely wild, impossible even, but I swear to you it's real. I took another shaky breath and began to tell her everything. I started with the morning I woke up, the unsettling feeling, the missing photos. I described my parents' bizarre reactions, their unwavering denial. I told her about the hidden box, the photos of Emily and me, the locket. I recounted the agonizing gaslighting, the feeling of my entire reality crumbling around me. And finally, I told her about the unknown call, the distorted voice, the chilling message, and the persistent, unidentifiable hum. I spoke quickly, desperately, trying to convey the sheer terror and confusion that had consumed my life. Jessica listened in silence, occasionally interjecting with a soft, "Oh my God," or "Sarah, what are you talking about?" When I finished, there was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, slow and steady, on the other end. My stomach churned. This was it. She'd think I was crazy. She'd tell me to get some sleep, to see a doctor. "Sarah," she finally said, her voice quiet, thoughtful. That's a lot. And you're right, it sounds completely insane." My heart sank. "But," she continued, "I know you. You're not one for dramatics, and you certainly wouldn't call me out of the blue with something like this if it wasn't serious. And you really do sound terrified." A wave of relief, so potent it almost brought me to my knees, washed over me. She didn't dismiss me. She didn't laugh. "Thank you, Jess," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "Thank you for just listening." "Of course," she said, her tone firmer now. "So, you're saying your parents are denying they ever had a second daughter? Your twin sister?" "Yes. Completely. They act like I've hallucinated her my entire life. They've even removed all traces of her from the house, from our family photos, everything. Except for that box. I found it hidden away." "Okay," Jessica said, a problem-solving edge entering her voice. "This is a lot to process. But let's break this down. First, the box. Do you still have it? Can you describe some of the photos? Are there dates on them?" "Yes, I have it right here," I said, my gaze sweeping toward the closet where I'd hidden it again. "There are tons of photos. Emily and me at birthday parties, at school events, family vacations. Some of them have dates on the back, from when we were kids up until about a year ago." "A year ago?" Jessica repeated, a note of surprise in her voice. So, this isn't something from childhood that you might be misremembering. This is recent. Exactly, I exclaimed, feeling a surge of validation. She was here, Jess. Up until very recently. And then poof, gone. And everyone acts like she was never here. Okay, this is beyond messed up, Jessica muttered. And the locket? What about that? It's a simple silver locket, engraved with an E on one side and an S on the other. Inside there are 2 tiny photos, one of me, one of her. We wore them since we were little. An E and an S, Jessica mused. That's pretty clear evidence right there. Can you send me pictures of some of this stuff? The locket, a few of the photos, maybe the box itself. Yes, of course. I scrambled to retrieve the box, my fingers fumbling with the clasp. I pulled out the locket, the worn leather-bound photo album, and a few loose pictures. I snapped photos with my phone and sent them to her. A few moments later, my phone buzzed with her reply. Wow, she texted, followed by a call. Sarah, these are undeniable. That locket, those photos. That's you and your sister. No question. And the dates on the back are clear. So you believe me? I asked, a tremor in my voice. 100%, Jessica affirmed, her voice resolute. This is terrifying, Sarah. And whatever is going on, it's not you losing your mind. Someone is doing this to you. Or to Emily. Or both. But who? And why? That's what we need to figure out, Jessica said. Now about that call. The unknown number. Did you try calling it back? Yes, it goes straight to a voicemail. The same distorted voice, the same message. You shouldn't have remembered. And that hum. It's so weird, Jess. Like an old fan or a generator, but very faint. Can you record the voicemail and send it to me? She asked. I have some contacts, people who are good with audio analysis. Maybe they can clean it up, identify the voice, or at least pinpoint that hum. Yes, I'll do it right now. I quickly recorded the voicemail message on my phone and sent it to her. Good, she said. In the meantime, don't confront your parents again. Not yet. If they're involved, or if they're being manipulated, pushing them might make things worse. And don't tell anyone else about this. Just me. Keep the box hidden, keep your phone close, and stay alert. Does anything else feel off? Like you're being watched? Her question sent a shiver down my spine. I don't know, I admitted. But the insidious feeling of being observed had only intensified since the call. I just feel uneasy, like the air is thicker. Okay, listen, I'm going to start digging into this number and that audio right away, Jessica said, her voice taking on a determined edge. In the meantime, try to remember anything else. Any strange encounters recently? Any arguments with Emily? Anything at all that could shed light on why someone would want her gone and want you to forget her? I will, I promised, feeling a sliver of hope ignite within me. Having Jessica on my side, having someone believe me, was like a lifeline in a turbulent sea. Good. And Sarah, be careful. This sounds like it could be dangerous. Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the gravity of my situation. Dangerous. The word resonated with the chilling hum from the voicemail, with the silent, watchful presence I felt surrounding me. I hung up, a new resolve hardening my fear. Jessica was right. This was dangerous, but I wasn't alone anymore. And together we were going to find out what happened to Emily. I looked around my living room, the familiar space suddenly feeling alien, imbued with a hidden menace. My eyes fell on the window, the dark glass reflecting my own pale, anxious face. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement in the shadows outside. A brief, almost imperceptible shift in the darkness. My heart leaped into my throat. I pressed myself against the wall, straining my eyes, but there was nothing. Just the silent, empty street. Or was there? The hum from the voicemail seemed to grow louder in my mind. A subtle, unsettling vibration. I was being watched. I knew it. And whoever it was, they were getting closer. My eyes darted, searching for the source, but there was nothing. Just the silent, empty street. Or was there? The hum from the voicemail seemed to grow louder in my mind. A subtle, unsettling vibration. I was being watched. I knew it. And whoever it was, they were getting closer. A cold dread seeped into my bones, overriding all other sensations. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, oppressive silence of the night. Every shadow seemed to deepen, every mundane object on the street corner. A leaning trash can, a forgotten newspaper caught in a grate, transformed into a potential hiding spot for an unseen threat. My breath hitched. This was no longer a puzzle. This was survival. My instincts screamed at me to run, to flee blindly into the darkness, but a colder, more primal part of my brain urged caution. Running would make me a target, betray my fear. I had to blend, to appear casual, even as every nerve ending shrieked in alarm. I quickened my pace, not quite running, but moving with a desperate urgency, my gaze sweeping the deserted storefronts, the darkened alleys. I needed cover. I needed to disappear. Ahead, a narrow, unlit alleyway beckoned. A dark maw between the imposing brick wall of a closed antique shop and the grime-streaked facade of a darkened diner. It was a gamble, a plunge into deeper unknown, but it offered immediate concealment. Without a second thought, I ducked into its shadowy embrace, pressing myself against the rough brick wall, my phone clutched tight in my trembling hand. The alley was a symphony of forgotten smells. Damp earth, stale garbage, the metallic tang of rain-soaked concrete. The air hung heavy and still, pressing in on me, making it hard to breathe. I strained my ears, listening past the frantic thumping of my own heart. Nothing. Just the distant, muffled hum of the city, a sound that usually comforted, but now felt like a mocking echo of my isolation. But then there was another hum. The one from Emily's voicemail. It wasn't just a psychological echo of Emily's distress anymore. It was a frequency, a low, persistent electronic thrum that vibrated not just in my ears, but through the very bone of my skull. It was coming from the phone itself. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the device. The screen was dark, reflecting my own terrified eyes back at me like two wide, luminous pools. I unlocked it, navigated to the voicemail, and pressed play. Emily's voice, distorted and fragmented, filled the oppressive silence of the alley. And underneath it, clearer now, undeniable, was that low, steady thrum. It wasn't a normal phone hum, a faint background buzz. This was too precise, too mechanical, too intentional. Felt like a pulse, a beacon. A chill, colder than the night air, gripped me, seizing hold of my very core. They're tracking me. Through the phone, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. Emily must have known. Is that why her voice was so desperate, so fragmented? A desperate plea hidden beneath layers of static and fear? Was the hum a warning? Or was it what they used to find her? Suddenly, a shadow flickered at the alley entrance. Deeper than the others, it detached itself from the gloom, taking on a vague, human-like form. Tall, indistinct, a silhouette against the faint glow of the streetlights beyond. My blood ran cold. I froze, pressing myself further into the rough brick, barely breathing, trying to make myself as small and invisible as possible. The figure paused, their head seeming to slowly scan the street. Then, with an almost imperceptible shift, they turned towards the alley. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. They were coming for me. A surge of adrenaline, cold and electric, coursed through my veins. I had to move. My eyes frantically searched for an escape, and then I saw it. A rusted, ancient fire escape ladder, barely visible against the dark brick, reaching precariously upwards towards the darkened windows of the antique shop. It was a gamble, a desperate climb, but it was my only option. I scrambled, my fingers raw against the cold, corroded metal, hauling myself upwards with a strength born of pure terror. The ladder groaned in protest, each creak a thunderclap in the oppressive silence. I reached the first landing, then the second, my muscles screaming in protest, my lungs burning. I could hear them directly below now, their footsteps soft but deliberate, methodical, on the wet pavement of the alley. They weren't running. They were searching. Gasping for air, I risked a glance down. The figure was directly below, looking up. A faint glint of light caught something in their hand, a device? My mind raced, connecting the dots. The hum. The tracker. The phone. The phone was a liability. It was my only tangible proof that Emily existed, that my memories weren't fabrications, but it was also my undoing. A beacon guiding my pursuer. I fumbled with the phone, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold it. I needed the voicemail, not the device. I had to get the audio off of it. Email it to myself? Upload it to cloud storage? My fingers were clumsy, refusing to obey. The progress bar for my frantic attempt to email the file crawled agonizingly slowly across the screen, a cruel mockery of my desperation. Then a new sound, the distinct scrape of metal on metal. The figure had started climbing the ladder. Panic, raw and unreasoning, seized me. I couldn't wait. I couldn't risk holding onto the phone. My gaze darted wildly, and then I saw it. An open window on the second floor of the antique shop, slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness amidst the brick. Another gamble. I pried it open further, the wood groaning in protest, and squeezed through the narrow opening, landing with a soft thud on a dusty, creaky floor inside. The antique shop was a labyrinth of shadows and forgotten objects. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, mothballs, and forgotten dreams. Moonlight, sliced into narrow beams by dusty window panes, illuminated grotesque statues, shadowed armoires that seemed to lean in conspiratorially, and stacks of yellowed books that looked like watchful eyes. I ducked behind a tall, ornate wardrobe, its dark wood imposing and silent, offering a temporary shield. Footsteps outside. Then a muffled grunt as the figure reached the window. I held my breath, every muscle tensed, my heart threatening to burst through my chest. I had to get the voicemail off this phone, but there was no time. Then my eyes caught something on the back of the wardrobe, almost invisible in the gloom. A small, intricately carved drawer, a hidden compartment. A desperate, foolish impulse perhaps, but it was my only option. I jammed the phone inside, pushing it deep into the dusty recess, praying it would be enough. I couldn't have it on me. I needed to get away, then come back for it. I slipped out from behind the wardrobe, moving silently, carefully, towards the back of the shop, weaving through the maze of furniture and display cases. The window creaked open fully. A leg swung over. The figure landed heavily inside. A flashlight beam, a harsh white sword, cut through the darkness, sweeping the room. I could hear heavy breathing now, closer, more distinct. I found a back door bolted shut. My fingers, clumsy with fear, fumbled with the lock, each click and scrape echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. The flashlight beam was getting closer, closer. The bolt finally slid open with a loud clack. I burst out into a narrow back alley. Another street, another chance. I ran, not looking back, the fear a cold, hard knot in my stomach. The hum, though no longer emanating from the phone, still vibrated in my mind, a phantom sensation, a constant reminder of the pursuit, of an unseen enemy closing in. I had to think. The voicemail, the hum, the tracker, the terrifying, undeniable realization that Emily was real. She had known, and she had tried to warn me. Where would Emily have gone? Where would she have hidden something if she knew she was in danger? A memory flashed, vivid and sudden, cutting through the fog of my panic. Our treehouse. Not the one in the park, but the one we built ourselves in the overgrown, abandoned lot behind old Mr. Henderson's property. Our sanctuary. The one with the loose floorboard where we'd hide our most precious secrets. It was a long shot, a desperate hope, but it was the only place I could think of that they wouldn't know about. Place only we shared. I needed to get there. But first, I needed to lose whoever was after me. The email I tried to send, the one with Emily's voicemail. Had it gone through? I had no way of knowing. I was alone, hunted, and now without my only piece of tangible evidence. A terrifying, vulnerable position. My twin had existed, and I was going to prove it. My twin had existed, and I was going to prove it. The words echoed in my mind, a furious mantra against the ringing in my ears and the throbbing pain in my ribs. I pushed myself up from the grimy alley floor, every muscle screaming in protest. My head spun, a kaleidoscope of concrete and brick. The cold night air bit at my exposed skin, reminding me of the struggle, the cold, metallic grip on my arm, the sickening crunch of my phone as it was crushed and snatched away. My only tangible link to Emily gone. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. I was stranded, stripped of my identity in a way that felt eerily similar to how Emily herself had been erased. But beneath the panic, a spark of pure, unadulterated rage ignited. They wanted to silence me? They wanted me to disappear? Not a chance. My voice might be hoarse, my body might ache, but my resolve was solid steel. I stumbled out of the alley, moving with a desperate urgency, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to twist and writhe, morphing into watchful eyes, lurking figures. Every parked car felt like a potential trap, every pedestrian a potential spy. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the city. I pulled my jacket tighter, trying to blend into the shadows, to become invisible. My mind raced, trying to piece together a plan, any plan, without my phone, without any resources. My wallet was still in my pocket, thankfully, but using my credit cards was out of the question. They'd be traced instantly. I had a few crumpled dollars, enough for a bus fare, maybe a cheap coffee. But what good was money if I couldn't communicate, if I couldn't access information? Then a flicker of an old memory, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. Sarah Miller, our next-door neighbor growing up. She was a year older than us, always the ringleader of our childhood games. Sarah, who constantly mixed up Emily and me, who had a special nickname for Emily that only the three of us knew. She wouldn't just forget. She couldn't forget. She was my shot, my one desperate shot. But how to reach her? I didn't have her number. I didn't have a phone. My home was compromised, my work probably under surveillance. I needed a public computer, somewhere I could access the internet without leaving a trace. A public library. It was a long shot, risky, but it was all I had. I started walking, keeping to the less traveled streets, my senses on high alert. Every rustle of leaves, every distant siren, every fleeting glimpse of movement made me flinch. My paranoia was a living thing, a shadow dogging my heels. I felt their presence, the unseen watchers, the silent enforcers who had so effortlessly erased Emily. They were undoubtedly looking for me, for the guy who refused to forget. It took me what felt like an eternity, walking for miles, dodging alleyways, cutting through parks, until I finally spotted the familiar brick facade of the city's main library branch. It was late, but the library was still open, a beacon of knowledge and for me a sliver of hope. I pulled my hood low, trying to look like any other late-night student or researcher, though my disheveled appearance and wide, frantic eyes probably gave me away. Inside, the hushed atmosphere was a stark contrast to the frantic beat of my heart. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pale glow on rows of books and quiet patrons hunched over computers. I found an unoccupied terminal tucked away in a corner, far from the main entrance, and sank into the chair, my muscles aching in protest. My hands trembled as I logged onto a guest account, my reflection in the dark screen showing a stranger with fear-etched eyes. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Searching for Sarah Miller felt like shouting into the void, a desperate gamble. What if she'd moved? What if she'd changed her name? What if they had gotten to her too? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me, but I pushed it down. I had to try. I typed her name into a popular social media site. Sarah Miller. There were hundreds. I added Oakview High School, our old alma mater. The list narrowed. Then a profile picture that made my breath catch in my throat. It was her. Older, of course, but the same mischievous eyes, the same infectious smile. A wave of relief, so potent it almost brought me to tears, washed over me. She was real. She was still here. Now the hard part. How to contact her. A direct message could be intercepted. An email? I didn't have her email address. But the social media profile had a contact form. A way to send a private message. It was risky, but it was the only immediate option. I had to be careful. Cryptic. Urgent. Something that only she would understand. Something that would resonate with our shared past, with Emily. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a desperate plea forming in my mind. Sarah, I typed. It's Michael. This is going to sound insane, but I need your help. Remember the old oak tree behind your house where we carved our initials? And Emily's secret stash of candy wrappers? I need to talk to you about her. It's life or death. Don't reply here. Find me there tomorrow at noon. And Sarah, please come alone. Don't tell anyone you heard from me. Not a soul. I reread the message, my heart pounding. Was it too much? Too little? Would she understand the urgency? The danger? The reference to the oak tree and Emily's candy wrappers was a crucial detail, something intimate that only the three of us would truly remember. It was a test, a confirmation that I was Michael and that Emily was real. With a shaky breath, I clicked send. The message disappeared into the digital ether. A fragile paper boat launched into a stormy sea. I closed the browser, cleared the history, and logged out of the guest account, trying to erase every trace of my presence. As I stood up, a sudden chill snaked down my spine, colder than the night air outside. My eyes scanned the library, an instinctual primal warning blaring in my head. And then I saw it. A man impeccably dressed in a dark suit, sitting at a table near the main entrance, engrossed in a newspaper. His face was obscured, but there was something in the rigid set of his shoulders, the stillness of his posture, that made my blood run cold. It was the same almost invisible watchfulness I'd felt before, the same unsettling presence. He wasn't looking at the newspaper. He was watching the entrance. He was waiting. For me. My breath hitched. They had found me again. Or perhaps they had never stopped watching. The library, my brief sanctuary, was compromised. My message to Sarah, my last hope, was now a ticking time bomb. I had to get out, and fast. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, deafening rhythm. I wasn't just being hunted, I was trapped. And the game, I realized with a sickening lurch, had just begun. The walls of the room seemed to press in, suffocating me with their silent complicity. The air, once merely stale, now felt thick with unseen eyes. Sarah was gone, or worse, she was no longer Sarah. My mind raced, a frantic hamster on a wheel, trying to process the impossible truth. I was a pawn, and the board had just flipped. Every escape route I'd considered now seemed to vanish, replaced by an impenetrable barrier of fear and an unknown enemy. My gaze darted around the sparse room, searching for anything, any anomaly. The single window was sealed shut, the glass impossibly thick, offering only a distorted view of a gray, nondescript exterior. The door, heavy and steel-reinforced, was undoubtedly locked from the outside. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but a colder, more primal instinct took over: survive. I moved with a newfound urgency, my hands running over every surface. The bed, the small desk, the built-in closet, nothing. No hidden compartments, no loose floorboards, no ventilation shafts wide enough to crawl through. This place was designed to hold, designed to contain, designed to control. Then I noticed it. A faint, almost imperceptible line along the back wall of the closet, hidden behind a rail of identical plain gray jumpsuits. It wasn't a seam in the wallpaper. It was a hairline crack in the plaster, too straight, too precise to be accidental. My fingers traced it, a shiver running down my spine. It felt different, subtly colder than the surrounding wall. With renewed hope, I pushed, pulled, and prodded along the line. Nothing. It was solid. But the intuition, the gut feeling that had guided me this far, screamed at me to keep trying. I remembered the odd, almost mechanical click I'd heard earlier, just before Sarah's demeanor shifted. What if it wasn't a door unlocking, but something else engaging? My eyes scanned the room again, desperation fueling my observation. The tiny, almost invisible camera lens in the corner of the ceiling. The small, innocuous control panel next to the bed, usually just displaying the time and temperature. My gaze landed on it, and a wild thought sparked. The panel had a small, recessed button, labeled only with a generic system. I'd always assumed it was for adjusting the room's climate or calling for assistance. But what if it wasn't? What if it was a trigger? Taking a deep breath, my heart thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I pressed the button. There was no click, no beep, just a soft, almost inaudible whir. Nothing happened in the room. Disappointment gnawed at me, but then, a slight vibration started in the wall behind the closet. It intensified, a low hum resonating through the floor. I rushed back to the closet, pulling aside the jumpsuits. The hairline crack was now subtly widening. Slowly, agonizingly, a section of the wall, about the size of a narrow door, began to recede inward, then slide silently to the left, revealing a dark, narrow passage. A wave of fear and exhilaration washed over me. This was it. A way out or a way deeper in. I didn't hesitate. I slipped through the opening, careful to minimize any sound, and the panel slid shut behind me with the same soft whir, sealing me in darkness. The air in the passage was colder, metallic, and carried a faint, acrid scent I couldn't quite place. I fumbled along the wall, my fingers brushing against cold, smooth concrete. The passage sloped gently downwards, and I could hear a distant, rhythmic thrumming sound, like heavy machinery operating far below. This wasn't just a house, it was a complex. My eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, revealing a faint green light emanating from further down the corridor. I moved cautiously, each step a conscious effort to be silent. The thrumming grew louder, more distinct, occasionally punctuated by a high-pitched whine. This was no ordinary basement. The passage opened into a wider, brightly lit corridor, stark white and sterile, lined with identical steel doors. The green light I'd seen was from a series of indicator lights above each door. Most were green, but a few glowed a steady amber. The thrumming was deafening here, vibrating through the very soles of my feet. I crept along the wall, my heart a hammer against my ribs, straining to hear anything over the machinery. One of the steel doors, marked with the number 07 foot, was ajar. A sliver of light escaped, and hushed voices drifted out. Curiosity, a powerful, dangerous force, pulled me toward it. Peeking through the crack, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a storage room or a generator room. It was a control center. A massive bank of monitors glowed with data, complex graphs, and most chillingly live feeds of various rooms. My room, Sarah's room, other rooms I didn't recognize, but all with the same sparse, utilitarian design. A man and a woman, both dressed in pristine white lab coats, stood before one of the consoles. The man, balding with sharp, intelligent eyes, pointed at a screen displaying a brain scan. The neural pathways are stabilizing, Dr. Miller. Subject Delta 7 is responding well to the latest recalibration. Excellent, Dr. Hayes, the woman replied, her voice calm, devoid of any discernible emotion. We need to ensure full integration this time. No more spontaneous recall events. My blood ran cold. Recalibration? Spontaneous recall? What were they talking about? I strained to hear more. The anomaly with subject Delta 3 was unexpected, Dr. Hayes continued, his voice laced with annoyance. The twin linkage proved more resilient than anticipated. We nearly lost years of work. Twin linkage. The words hit me like a physical blow. My twin. They knew. They caused it. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me. These people in this sterile hidden bunker were responsible for erasing my sister, for twisting my memories, for this entire nightmare. Delta 3's memories have been sufficiently suppressed now, Dr. Miller said, her gaze fixed on her own screen. The original identity has been fully overwritten. We've even introduced a new childhood narrative to prevent further glitches. Overwritten? New narrative? They weren't just erasing, they were creating. They were building new lives, new paths for people. And the glitches, was that me? Was I subject Delta 3? The one who remembered? My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the horrifying implications. They weren't just messing with my life. They were doing this to others. The screens with other rooms, were those other subjects? Other people whose identities had been stolen, rewritten, or perhaps whose twins had been erased. The next phase for Delta 7 is crucial, Dr. Hayes said, glancing at a clock on the wall. Family integration protocol begins in T-6 hours. We can't afford any more complications. The family needs to believe this is their child completely. Family integration protocol. They were putting these subjects into new families, new lives, without any memory of their past. It was a chilling thought, a violation beyond comprehension. And if I was Delta 3, what did that mean for me? Had I been placed with a fake family? Was my entire life a fabrication built on lies? A sudden sharp beep from one of the consoles made me jump, pressing myself tighter against the wall. Anomaly detected. A synthesized voice announced calmly from a speaker. Subject Delta 3. Corridor access. Sector Gamma 7. My blood froze. They knew. They had seen me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a deafening drum against the terrifying silence that followed the announcement. Dr. Hayes and Dr. Miller instantly whirled around, their eyes scanning the monitors, pinpointing my location. The hidden passage, Dr. Hayes exclaimed, his voice tight with anger. How did she activate it? She must have deduced the override sequence from the main panel, Dr. Miller murmured, her expression still unsettlingly calm, even as the urgency in the room escalated. Initiate lockdown. Containment protocols, full activation. Do not allow Delta 3 to reach the surface. We cannot risk exposure. I didn't wait to hear more. I spun around, my mind screaming, and bolted back into the narrow, dark passage. The thrumming of the machinery now sounded like a predator's growl, closing in. My feet pounded on the concrete, propelling me forward, away from the horrifying truth I had just uncovered, away from the cold, calculating minds that had orchestrated my entire existence. I could hear footsteps echoing behind me, growing louder, faster. Heavy boots on concrete. They were coming. They were hunting me. I wasn't just trapped anymore. I was running for my life, a ghost in their meticulously controlled machine. The passage ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, plunging into deeper shadows, but I had to keep going. There was no turning back. My twin, my erased memories, the horrifying truth about this place. It all depended on me finding a way out. And the game, I realized with a fresh surge of terror, had just become a desperate fight for survival. She sprinted, not knowing where she was going, but driven by a primal need to escape the tightening grip of this horrifying reality. The sterile corridors, once merely disorienting, now felt like the arteries of a predator, closing in around her. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every distant hum a warning. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the facility. The realization that she was a pawn, a subject in a monstrous experiment, fueled a cold rage that chased away the last vestiges of fear. Emily, her twin. She had to find Emily, even if all that remained was the truth of her existence. She pressed herself against a cool metal wall, peering around a corner. The corridor beyond was empty, but a faint metallic clang echoed from somewhere deeper within the complex. Security. They knew she was awake. They knew she was searching. The game wasn't just psychological anymore. It was physical, a deadly hide-and-seek. Her eyes scanned the walls, searching for anything out of place. A maintenance panel, an unlocked door, a map, anything. She spotted a small, almost invisible vent cover near the ceiling. Too high, but further down, a heavy reinforced door stood ajar. A sliver of light spilling out. It looked like a utility closet, but something about its slightly off placement, its subtle difference from the other identical doors, caught her attention. It was too easy. A trap? Or a desperate oversight? Compelled by a gut feeling, she pushed the door wider. Inside, it wasn't a utility closet. It was a narrow, dark stairwell, spiraling downwards into an oppressive silence. The air grew colder with each step, thick with the scent of ozone and something vaguely metallic. This wasn't part of the public-facing areas. This was hidden. This was where the real secrets lay. She descended, her footsteps barely whispers on the cold concrete. The spiraling descent seemed endless, each turn revealing only more darkness. Then a faint glow appeared below, growing steadily brighter. It wasn't a natural light. It pulsed with an artificial, almost menacing energy. She reached the bottom, stepping out into a vast, cavernous space. It was a data center, unlike anything she'd ever seen. Rows upon rows of servers hummed with a low, relentless thrum, their indicator lights blinking like 1,000 watchful eyes. Cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines, converging on massive central consoles. This was the brain of the operation. This was where her memories, Emily's existence, and countless other lives were being manipulated. Her gaze swept across the room, adrenaline coursing through her veins. One console, larger than the others, stood illuminated in the center, its multiple screens displaying complex algorithms and streams of data. It looked like the primary control hub. This was it. She approached it cautiously, her heart pounding. The screens flickered, showing graphs and timelines, names and dates. It was overwhelming, a torrent of information. She saw her own name, Sarah Miller, highlighted on one screen, next to another name that sent a jolt of ice through her. Emily Miller. Their profiles, side by side, detailed their genetic markers, their psychological profiles, their integration scores. Integration scores. The phrase alone was chilling. It wasn't about treatment or recovery. It was about assimilation, about making subjects fit a predetermined narrative. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the glowing interface, her mind racing. She needed to access the files to understand how they did this. Why? Suddenly, a calm, resonant voice filled the vast space, echoing from unseen speakers. It was a man's voice, smooth and authoritative, yet devoid of warmth. Well, it seems our little experiment has developed a rather inconvenient curiosity. Sarah froze, her hand hovering over the console. She spun around, frantically searching for the source of the voice, but saw no one. It was disembodied, omnipresent. "Don't bother looking, Sarah," the voice continued, a hint of amusement in its tone. "I'm everywhere. And nowhere. You've proven remarkably resilient. Most subjects, when faced with the truth of their rewritten pasts, simply fracture. A few even embrace the new reality. But you insist on digging." A wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't some rogue technician. This was the mastermind, the architect of her living nightmare. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of the servers. "What have you done to Emily?" The voice chuckled, a dry academic sound. "Emily, a fascinating case, a variable we had not fully accounted for. Her cognitive resilience, her emotional attachment to you, it made her a challenge, but ultimately a success. A proof of concept." "Proof of concept?" Sarah's voice rose, laced with pure horror. "You erased her. You stole her life." "We optimized her life," the voice corrected calmly. "And yours by extension. Imagine, Sarah, a world free of trauma, free of inconvenient truths, a world where everyone's memories are perfectly aligned, perfectly curated for optimal societal function. That is our vision. That is Project Chimera. Project Chimera. The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Sarah's mind reeled. Optimized? Curated? This wasn't just about her and Emily. This was massive. Emily discovered something she shouldn't have, didn't she? Sarah pressed, a desperate flicker of insight igniting within her. That's why you erased her. She found out about Project Chimera. A brief silence from the voice. Then a sigh. You are more perceptive than we anticipated. Yes, Emily was resourceful. She stumbled upon some early data logs, some preliminary research into neural synchronization. She was always the more adventurous twin, wasn't she? The casual mention of Emily, the intimate knowledge of their personalities, sent shivers down Sarah's spine. They had studied them, profiled them, dissected their lives. She tried to warn me, Sarah whispered, remembering fragmented dreams, fleeting feelings of unease. She tried to tell me everything. Indeed, the voice acknowledged. A commendable effort, but futile. We intervened before she could fully communicate the scope of her discovery. Her memories, her very identity, were reintegrated into the collective data stream. A sacrifice for the greater good, you might say. Sacrifice. Sarah's voice cracked. You murdered her. You murdered my sister. Murder is such a primitive term, Sarah. We simply recontextualized her existence. She lives on in a way, as data, as a successful model for future integrations. And you, Sarah, were to be the final step. A controlled subject, perfectly adapted to her new, single identity, unaware of the missing piece. But I remembered, Sarah said, a fierce determination hardening her gaze. I remembered Emily. You failed. The voice was silent for a moment, and Sarah almost thought she had won a small victory. Then it spoke again, and this time there was a chilling edge to its calmness. A temporary setback. Your remembering was an anomaly. A residual neural pathway that persisted despite our most advanced techniques. But anomalies can be corrected. And now you've provided us with invaluable data on how to perfect the process. Thank you, Sarah. You've been an excellent research subject. The screens around her began to flash, displaying urgent warnings. Red alerts pulsed across the central console. Sarah's eyes darted to the data streams, horrified to see her own neural patterns, her memory engrams, being analyzed, dissected, and then purged. What are you doing? She shrieked, her heart seizing with terror. A final adjustment, Sarah, the voice replied, its tone now devoid of any pretense of amusement, purely clinical. We cannot have loose ends. Your memories of Emily, your memories of this conversation, of this place, they will all be systematically erased. And this time it will be permanent. You will wake up again, in your carefully constructed life, content and complete. A perfect subject. A perfect citizen. A wave of dizziness washed over her. Her head throbbed, a sharp, piercing pain behind her eyes. The lights in the data center flickered, and the hum of the servers intensified, resonating deep within her bones. She could feel it, a cold, invasive force pushing into her mind, trying to tear away the very fabric of her identity. No, she screamed, clutching her head. She wouldn't let them. She couldn't. Emily. The truth. It had to survive. Her eyes frantically scanned the console, searching for anything, any command, any override. A small, glowing icon caught her attention, labeled, Emergency Data Purge, Override. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. Foolish girl, the voice sneered, losing its composure slightly. You think you can fight against the collective will of progress? Against the most advanced neurocognitive science known to man? Ignoring the pain, ignoring the voice, Sarah slammed her hand down on the override icon. The data center erupted. Alarms blared, red lights flashed wildly, and the hum of the servers turned into a deafening shriek. Sparks flew from the consoles, and the screens flickered violently, displaying scrambled code and error messages. What have you done? The voice roared, no longer calm, but filled with a sudden, genuine fury. Sarah didn't know what she had done, but it had clearly disrupted something critical. The invasive pressure in her mind lessened, replaced by a dull ache. She looked at the main screen, which now displayed a single, massive error message. Critical system failure. Data integrity compromised. Reboot initiated. Warning. Memory reconstruction at risk. You've destabilized the entire network, Sarah, the voice shrieked, tinged with panic. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? The implications for our subjects, the potential for widespread cognitive fragmentation. Good, Sarah gasped, a wild, desperate triumph surging through her. Let them remember. Let them all remember what you did. She heard heavy footsteps approaching, fast and urgent, from the spiral stairwell. Security. They were coming for her. She had bought herself time, but at what cost? The entire facility was in chaos, alarms screaming, lights strobing. She had no idea if her action had saved her memories, or simply condemned them, and everyone else's, to a different kind of oblivion. But she had fought back. She had struck a blow. She turned and ran, navigating the now chaotic data center, dodging sparking consoles and falling debris. Her mind raced. The override button. What exactly did it do? Had she truly released the memories of other subjects? Or had she just triggered a catastrophic system collapse, potentially wiping everything, including Emily's last traces? There was no time to think. The footsteps were closer, punctuated by the angry shouts of guards. She had to get out. She had to find a way to expose Project Chimera. And somehow, against all odds, she still held on to the desperate hope that somewhere, in the chaos she had unleashed, a part of Emily might just have been set free. The alarm shrieked, a piercing, relentless wail that vibrated through the very metal of the facility. Jessica could hear the shouts of guards, closer now, their voices echoing in the sudden, disorienting darkness. The emergency lights, a sickly red glow, had flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every movement. This was it. Her chance. The chaos she had unleashed was her only shield. She pushed herself to her feet, her muscles screaming in protest from the recent ordeal, but adrenaline coursed through her veins, overriding the pain. She had to get out. She had to find a way to expose Project Chimera. And somehow, against all odds, she still held on to the desperate hope that somewhere, in the chaos she had unleashed, a part of Emily might just have been set free. The corridor was a disorienting maze of flickering red. She knew the general layout, not just from the brief time she'd been here, but from the fragmented memories of Emily that still occasionally surfaced in her mind: corridors, labs, security checkpoints. It was a terrifying yet invaluable blueprint. She moved with a purpose, her steps light, her senses hyper-alert. The facility was alive with frantic activity, the thud of heavy boots, the urgent commands barked into radios. She pressed herself against a wall as a patrol of 3 guards, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, hurried past her hiding spot. They were heading deeper into the complex, away from the perimeter. Good. Her target was clear. The central server room. If she was going to expose them, she needed undeniable proof, and that proof would be stored in their digital heart. She remembered a schematic, a fleeting image from Emily's consciousness, showing a heavily guarded central hub on a lower level. The power outage would have crippled some of their security, but not all. It was a gamble, but her only one. She navigated maintenance tunnels, squeezing through narrow passages that reeked of stale air and ozone. She bypassed locked doors, using the momentary vulnerability of the electronic locks, short-circuiting them with a small makeshift device she'd managed to construct from scavenged parts in the lab. Each click of a bypass lock was a victory, a small step closer to freedom. Finally, she reached a reinforced door, clearly the entrance to a high-security area. The emergency lights here were stronger, indicating a more robust backup power supply. A keypad glowed faintly beside it. She remembered the code, or rather, Emily remembered it. A sequence of numbers flashed in her mind, a reflex, not a conscious thought. Her fingers flew across the pad, entering the digits. There was a soft hiss, then a heavy thunk as the magnetic locks disengaged. The server room was a cavern of humming machines, racks upon racks of blinking lights, a digital heartbeat thrumming in the silence. The air was cool, sterile, and thick with the scent of electricity. She pulled out a small, encrypted USB drive she'd hidden in her clothing, a contingency plan she prepared weeks ago, long before she'd even suspected the true horror of her situation. She located a console, a terminal that still had power, its screen displaying lines of code. With practiced ease, she began to interface with the system. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, a flurry of commands. She knew what she was looking for: Project Chimera files, subject alpha data, memory transfer logs, anything related to Emily. The sheer volume of data was staggering. a digital ocean of information. As she delved deeper, the truth began to unravel, more horrifying than anything she had imagined. It wasn't just about Michael and Emily. It was a sprawling, intricate network. Files titled Subject Beta, Subject Gamma, Project Phoenix. There were dozens, hundreds of entries. Each subject had a corresponding twin, a recipient of transferred memories. But not all were successful. There were logs of rejection, instability, termination. The chilling euphemisms for failure sent a cold dread through her. Then she found it. A directory labeled Emily Iterations. Her breath hitched. Iterations? She clicked on it, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. File after file appeared. Emily 01, Subject Alpha, Initial Transfer. Emily 02, Subject Alpha, Personality Adjustment. Emily 03, Subject Alpha, Integration Phase. It wasn't just one Emily. It was a process, a continuous refinement. Her Emily, the one she remembered, the one she had fought for, was merely the successful culmination of countless attempts. She scrolled through the logs, a silent scream building in her throat. The early iterations showed disturbing results. Mental breakdowns, complete personality erasure, even physical deterioration. Each failure was meticulously documented, analyzed, and used to refine the next attempt. They weren't just transferring memories, they were engineering a new person, a replacement, a more compliant, more stable version of Michael's lost twin. But then something else caught her eye. A subdirectory within Emily 03, labeled Residual Echoes. She clicked it, a desperate hope blooming amidst the horror. Inside, there were fragmented data logs, neural activity patterns, and even audio recordings. They were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there. Traces, remnants. Not Emily's full personality, but echoes. Whispers of her original self, stubbornly refusing to be entirely overwritten. They were like ghosts in the machine, proof that even Project Chimera couldn't completely erase a soul. A wave of nausea washed over her. Emily wasn't just gone. She had been systematically dismantled, rebuilt, and any lingering part of her original self had been meticulously suppressed. But the echoes, they were a flicker of hope, a sign that even in their darkest hour, the human spirit, or at least its essence, could persist. She began to prioritize. She needed the core files on Project Chimera, the evidence of its existence, its methods, its ethical violations. But she also needed those residual echoes files. They were the last fragile testament to the real Emily. She started the download, the USB drive's indicator light blinking furiously. The data transfer was agonizingly slow. Every second felt like an eternity. Suddenly, a distant clang echoed from the corridor outside. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, were approaching. The emergency lights in the server room flickered, then brightened momentarily, a sign that the main power might be trying to restore itself. Her time was running out. She could hear muffled voices now, growing louder. They were searching the area, closing in. She glanced at the screen. The download was only halfway complete. She had to make a choice. Expose the entire project, or salvage the last vestiges of Emily. There was no choice. Both. She would take what she could. She sped up the transfer, sacrificing some of the less critical data, focusing on the core project files and the residual echoes. The footsteps were right outside the door now. She could hear the distinct sound of a security panel being accessed, then the heavy thud of a shoulder against the reinforced door. They knew she was here. The download progress bar crawled towards completion. 80%. 85. A loud bang reverberated through the room as something heavy struck the door. The metal groaned. 90%. Another bang, closer, harder. The door was groaning, bending inward. Jessica's eyes darted around the room. There had to be another way out. A maintenance hatch? A ventilation shaft? She spotted it. A small, inconspicuous panel near the floor, partially hidden by a server rack. It looked like an access panel for cabling. It might be too small, but it was her only hope. 98%. 99. The door splintered, a crack appearing in the reinforced metal. A flashlight beam pierced through the gap, followed by the muffled shouts of guards. 100%. Jessica yanked the USB drive from the port. She didn't hesitate. She scrambled towards the panel, tearing at the rusted latches. The door burst open, revealing 3 armed guards, their faces grim, their weapons raised. "Freeze!" one of them shouted, his voice echoing in the server room. But Jessica was already through the panel, squeezing herself into the dark, narrow space beyond. She pulled the panel shut behind her, plunging herself into claustrophobic darkness, just as the first bullet struck the metal where she had been standing seconds before. She was in a service crawl space, a labyrinth of pipes and wires leading somewhere. She didn't know where, but it was away from them. For now, the shouts and gunfire faded behind her, replaced by the frantic thrum of her own heart and the rasp of her breath. She had the data. She had the echoes. Now she just had to survive. She had the data. She had the echoes. Now she just had to survive. Emily didn't stop running until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. The maze of abandoned industrial buildings, a relic of a bygone era, had been her unlikely salvation. She ducked into a derelict warehouse, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of decay. Sunlight filtered weakly through grimy windows high above, creating shafts of light that illuminated swirling motes of dust. She collapsed behind a stack of rusted barrels, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to regulate her ragged breathing. The metallic taste of fear was still in her mouth, but beneath it, a strange sense of triumph began to bloom. She had done it. She had escaped. The drive was still clutched tightly in her hand, a cold, smooth weight against her palm. It felt like holding a piece of the universe, a tiny shard of truth in a world built on lies. She knew she couldn't stay here. They would be looking for her, and they wouldn't stop until they found her or what she carried. Her phone was dead, shattered in the chaos. Her car was long gone. She was completely alone, miles from anything familiar, but she wasn't helpless. Not anymore. She waited. Hours crawled by. The sun moved across the sky, painting the dust-filled air with different hues of orange and gold. She gnawed on the last energy bar from Dr. Thorne's bag, forcing down the dry, tasteless sustenance. Her mind raced, replaying the terror, the desperation, but also the clarity of Dr. Thorne's final moments. He had believed in her, in the truth. He had sacrificed everything. She wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. As dusk settled, casting long, eerie shadows, Emily knew she had to move. She needed a way to get the data out to someone who would listen, someone who had the power to expose Aperture Industries. She thought of old friends, distant relatives, anyone who might have a platform. Then a name surfaced, a flicker of hope in the darkness. Sarah Chun. Sarah, her roommate from college, now a tenacious investigative journalist known for her relentless pursuit of truth. No woman for conventional explanations. She was Emily's best, only shot. Under the cover of darkness, Emily began to walk. It was a long, grueling journey, hitchhiking with truck drivers who asked no questions, walking through endless stretches of highway shoulder, driven by a singular purpose. Days blurred into a haze of exhaustion and paranoia. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant car light a potential pursuer. But she kept moving, fueled by the memory of Clara, by Dr. Thorne's sacrifice, and by the burning need to uncover the truth. Finally, a week later, haggard and worn, Emily reached a small, nondescript town far from the city. She found a cheap motel, paid cash, and then with trembling hands, purchased a burner phone and a small, secure laptop. This was it. The moment of truth. She plugged the drive into the laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple folder structure. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just data. These were the echoes. She started with the video logs, Dr. Thorne's shaky, urgent voice filling the small motel room. He spoke of Project Chimera, not as a search for alternate realities, but as a creation of them. He explained the initial breakthroughs, a theoretical framework for manipulating quantum entanglement on a macroscopic scale, allowing for subtle, targeted alterations to the fabric of space-time itself. We weren't just observing, his voice crackled. We were sculpting reality, erasing, rewriting, refining. Emily watched in horrified fascination as the logs detailed the experiments. They had learned to isolate specific individuals, specific events, and systematically remove them from the collective consciousness. It wasn't about parallel universes merging. It was about one reality being meticulously overwritten, leaving only ghosts in the memories of those who were somehow sensitive enough to perceive the original timeline. Then came the chilling revelation, Clara. Dr. Thorne's voice grew heavy with guilt. Clara was an early subject, not intentionally at first. A side effect of a large-scale test in a populated area. We were trying to neutralize a minor political figure. Clara's genetic closeness to Emily, the twin bond, made her uniquely susceptible to the initial ripple effect. She was collateral. We realized the potential then, to erase without a trace, to rewrite history one person at a time. Emily watched fragmented footage, grainy and distorted, but undeniably Clara. Clara laughing in their childhood backyard, Clara arguing good-naturedly over a board game, Clara blowing out candles on a birthday cake that Emily now remembered celebrating alone. The glitches she had experienced, the fleeting visions, the phantom limbs, they were not a failing of her mind, but a triumph of her spirit. Her unique neurosynaptic patterns, perhaps amplified by the twin connection, had allowed her to retain fragments of the original, unsculpted reality. She was a living echo chamber. The horror deepened with each video, each document. Aperture Industries wasn't a scientific research facility. It was a reality engineering organization, funded by shadowy figures who sought ultimate control. They had the power to make inconvenient truths vanish, to silence dissent, to rewrite history to their whims. Clara was just one of countless others, erased from existence, their lives unlived, their memories unremembered by all but the rarest few. Tears streamed down Emily's face, not just for Clara, but for the terrifying implications of what she was seeing. Her entire life, her perception of reality had been a lie, a carefully constructed narrative by an organization playing God. Her grief was immense, but so was her resolve. Dr. Thorne had left these echoes for a reason. He had hoped someone would listen, someone would fight back. She knew what she had to do. She composed an anonymous email, attaching the encrypted data. She wrote a brief, urgent message to Sarah Chun, explaining nothing but hinting at everything. Sarah, this is from an anonymous source. It's bigger than anything you've ever covered. Reality itself is at stake. Verify this, disseminate it. Trust no one. She sent it, then wiped the laptop clean, destroyed the burner phone, and smashed the drive into irreparable pieces. The physical evidence was gone, but the digital truth was out there, in the hands of the one person Emily knew would move mountains to expose it. The following weeks were a blur of nervous anticipation. Emily lived off the grid, constantly moving, watching the news from afar. First there was nothing, then whispers. Conspiracy theories on fringe websites, dismissed as outlandish. But Sarah Chun was a tenacious journalist. Emily knew she would be meticulously verifying every byte, every fragmented video, every chilling word from Dr. Thorne's logs. Then it exploded. A small independent news outlet broke the story, citing anonymous sources and undeniable, verified data. Other, larger outlets, initially skeptical, began to pick it up as Sarah, working with a network of trusted colleagues, provided irrefutable evidence. The concept of reality sculpting was too unbelievable, too sci-fi. But the raw footage, the scientific papers, the internal memos from Aperture Industries, all pointed to a horrifying truth. Aperture Industries became a storm of controversy. Stock prices plummeted, executives were arrested, and government investigations were launched. The world reeled, grappling with the unthinkable, that their memories, their history might not be as solid as they believed. The Clara effect, as some journalists began to call it, became a chilling testament to the fragility of memory and the terrifying power of unchecked ambition. Emily watched it all unfold from the shadows. She was safe for now. Her old life was gone, shattered beyond repair. She couldn't go back, couldn't risk exposure. She was a ghost, a survivor from a reality that almost didn't exist. Sometimes she would look at old photographs, pictures she had carried with her from her parents' house. In them she could still see the faint outline, the ghost of a smile, a shimmering presence that only she could perceive. Clara, her twin. The world had been saved from Aperture's immediate threat, the project seemingly dismantled, its architects facing justice. But the knowledge, the terrifying truth, was out there. Reality wasn't fixed. It was malleable. It could be bent, broken, and rewritten. And if one group of people could do it, who was to say another wouldn't rise, learning from Aperture's mistakes? Emily often wondered if she had truly won. She had found the truth, exposed the lie, but at what cost? Her life was forever altered, haunted by the echoes of a sister only she remembered. She walked through a world that felt both familiar and strangely alien. A world where the lines between what was real and what was fabricated had blurred irrevocably. She had escaped the experiment, but she could never truly escape the knowledge. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, A chilling thought would creep in, a whisper from the edges of her mind. What if this reality too was just another layer? What if the truth she had uncovered was simply another, more elaborate, more convincing lie? The echoes were real, but what if the song had never truly ended?